Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and remember, Context is Everything Media Network founder and CEO John Michael is reading a textbook. Again, cover to cover. This one is an American history textbook from the year 1940. 1940, that's right, it's an old book. And it's from a Catholic school's curriculum, so it's going to have some Catholic school teachings in it. You'd be surprised how in 1940, this Catholic school American history textbook was pretty apologetic about mistreatment of numerous cultural groups that were mistreated by the early Americans. So, kind of interesting. 1940 people weren't that bad. As a matter of fact, they seemed kind of nice, at least on paper. Chapter 6, Section 5, Birth of Our Nation, The Tide of War Turns. Brighter days. Winning the important Battle of Saratoga was most helpful to the Americans. Its most important result was that France made up her mind openly to help the Americans. Before long, the French sent over a fleet of ships and an army. They loaned Congress money and sent us supplies. They kept English ships and English troops busy in other parts of the world. We needed the help of France. Without the French, we could hardly have won the war. War in the South. The English were badly beaten in the North, so they turned to the South. They were successful for some time. Savannah in Georgia and Charleston in South Carolina were captured by the British. Both are beautiful towns, I have to tell you. General Cornwallis was in command of a fine army. It was made up of British troops and American Tories. Americans who remained loyal to the British government were called Tories. Cornwallis gave the Americans a bad thrashing at Camden, South Carolina. General Gates, perhaps the poorest American officer, was in command in the South. Cornwallis sent out his troops to conquer the South. The country rises. The fight in the South became a grim and cruel one. It was war between American patriots and American Tory. Brother fought brother and no mercy was shown. The Patriots had few troops, but they had fine leaders. Daniel Morgan was there in his as a rifleman. No enemy was safe within gunshot of Morgan's men. Francis Marion was a splendid guerrilla fighter. They called him the Swamp Fox. He was a terror to the Tories and the British. He moved swiftly and secretly and fell on the enemy savagely. Thomas Sumter, the Carolina Gamecock, was another keen fighter. Leader of a few hundred irregulars, he would dash and attack the British post. He might be beaten off, but he soon struck again. What? What on earth did I just read? Leading a few hundred irregulars, he would dash in and attack a British post. He might be beaten off, but he would soon strike again. What are irregulars? What are irregulars? What are irregulars in 1940s speech? Because if it is what it sounds like, what a bizarre image is in my head. And it's not funny, but I do think that the terminology might be kind of funny. Not in a good way, but in a, wow, we used to say that. Another funny term from this book is they call people of Islam, they call them Mohammedans, people who serve Muhammad or worship Muhammad. I think that is it sounds antiquated. And I think it's interesting to read the antiquated words from just whatever 80 years ago. Foreign friends. Americans during the long years of war had the help of many men from Europe. The men loved liberty, and they were willing to help Americans win their liberty. The brave Marquis Robert Lafayette of France had come to America. As soon as I heard of American independence, my heart was elated. I don't know how to do any other accents other than British accents, by the way. That was a French guy. Washington loved this young, brave Frenchman. He trusted him and found him to be a splendid soldier. Baron de Kalb was a friend of Lafayette. De Kalb fought bravely for America. He met a heroic death at the Battle of Camden, where he was leading the Continentals. The Americans were sometimes called the Continentals. Baron von Steuben was from Prussia. He was a trained officer who had fought with the finest troops in Europe. He became a drill master of the American troops. He taught them how to act in battle, how to fire volleys, and how to make a bayonet charge. He soon turned the American Continentals into a well-trained troops. Thaddeus Kosciuszko came from the far-off Poland to help the Americans win their freedom. He was an engineer and showed the Americans how to fortify important places and how to build bridges across streams and how to erect earthworks behind which the soldiers could hide. Casimir Pulaski was another brave fighter from Poland. He was an experienced fighter in the wars in his native land. He was exiled to America and offered to fight for his new country. His troops, called the Pulaski Legion, fought splendidly. General Greene. The American leader, General Horatio Gates, was the pet of some of the men of the Continental Congress. General Gates had been badly whipped at Camden, so Congress now asked Washington to name a commander of the South. Washington gladly appointed Nathanael Greene, next to Washington. Greene was the finest officer in the Revolution. Greene's army was not large, but he had a splendid body of officers. He proved himself to be a good leader. A series of fights started between Cornwallis and Greene. They fought for South Carolina to North Virginia. Greene might lose a battle, but never lost his army. He retreated, drew on the enemy, and then turned and fought the enemy. Finally, Cornwallis left Greene and went to Virginia. It was a fatal move for the British. Washington sent Lafayette with a small army to oppose Cornwallis. Cornwallis destroyed as much property as he could and then camped at Yorktown. Lafayette was soon in front of Cornwallis. At his back was York River. The end. Washington saw his chance. He urged General Rochambeau, the commander of the French army, to go with him to capture Cornwallis. The two American armies rushed to Virginia. Cornwallis was hemmed in. A French fleet under Admiral de Gris prevented escape on the water side. The final battle was on. One of the first Americans to take a British defense was young Captain Alexander Hamilton. A fight became furious. The Americans and their friends, the French, fought with fine courage. The British fought bravely too. But there was a lost cause. Cornwallis saw that he could not win, nor could he escape. Only surrender was left. This took place on October 19th, 1781. A British statesman said, "It is all over." He was right. Washington had brought victory to the American army. End of the Revolution. Fighting ended with the surrender of Cornwallis at Yorktown. The Revolutionary War was over. Americans and English both wanted peace. Each side wanted to say what the terms of peace would be. Another kind of battle had to be fought. It was a battle of wits, a battle to gain every possible advantage in a peace treaty. America sent some of her cleverest men to Paris, where the peace treaty was planned. John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and John Jay represented the new republic. The treaty was finally signed in September 3rd, 1783. The three most important terms of the treaty were: 1. The independence of the United States was acknowledged by England. 2. The new nation extended from the Atlantic to the Mississippi and from Canada to Florida. 3. American rights to fish off banks of Newfoundland were acknowledged. George Washington's farewell. One of the saddest events in Washington's life was his parting with his officers. General Washington was a man who had fought together General Washington and his men had fought together during the long, bitter years of the Revolution. They had learned to understand and to respect one another. The officers were very fond of their leader. There were tears in Washington's eyes as they said goodbye to his officers. As he said goodbye to his officers. He was very sorry to part from his fine men, but he was happy that the war was over. Washington felt that now we could return to the bank of the Potomac River. Here, Washington planned to live in peace and happiness. He could not foresee what was ahead of him. There was yet great work to be done for this country. George Washington had saved the American colonies. Soon, he must save the new nation. And that, folks, is that. I hope you have a lovely day. God bless. Goodbye. And please subscribe.